The room was filled with light and quiet power. Glass walls showed a city built on money and ambition. Men in dark suits sat around a long table, waiting. At the center stood a man with confidence on his face, holding a pen. Behind him stood his wife, silent and unseen. She did not move. She did not speak. Her hands trembled slightly, but no one noticed. The man smiled and signed the document. In that moment, he gave company shares to the woman standing beside him, his mistress. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. Everyone celebrated. But something broke quietly. The wife felt it in her chest. Years of silence collapsed into a single breath. She had built this world with her own hands. Yet her name was missing from every smile in that room. People whispered softly. They wondered why the wife did not react. They questioned why she stayed quiet. No one knew the truth. Her name was Emma. For many years, she lived behind the spotlight. She stayed awake at night while the man slept peacefully. She worked in silence while his name became famous. She cooked alone in empty kitchens. She waited alone in large houses. Her hunger was not for food, but for respect. Her pain was not visible, but it was deep. Silence was not her weakness. Silence was how she survived. At home, there were rules. Emma never spoke about business. She never asked questions. She never shared opinions. She was warned gently at first, then firmly. If she crossed the line, she would lose everything. Fear became part of her daily life. Pressure grew with every success. Suddenly, the mistress stood and laughed softly. She thanked the man for trusting her. She touched his arm proudly in front of everyone. Her confidence filled the room. Emma lowered her eyes. Her fingers tightened into a fist. Inside her heart, something changed. A door closed quietly. Memories rushed back to her. A small apartment with cold floors. A borrowed laptop that barely worked. Long nights filled with fear and hope. She remembered selling her jewelry to save the company. She remembered calling banks again and again. She remembered planning every move while hiding in the background. She remembered choosing silence so he could stand tall. She gave her youth to the dream. She gave her voice to protect him. She gave her strength so the empire could rise. No one in that room knew this. No one knew whose name was on the first legal papers. No one knew who banks trusted behind closed doors. No one knew who truly controlled the system. Everything looked perfect. But something was wrong. The meeting ended with smiles and handshakes. People walked out laughing. The mistress held the shares like a prize. Emma stayed behind. The hallway was empty and quiet. She looked at her reflection in the glass wall. Her face was calm, but her eyes were different. For the first time in years, she felt clear. For the first time, fear lost its grip. She whispered softly to herself, "It is time." The silence followed her steps. The story did not end there. If silent pain speaks to you, if quiet strength moves you, subscribe to Silent Family Tears, because this story has only begun. Morning light entered the quiet house. Emma sat at the dining table with a cold cup of coffee. The house was large, expensive, and empty. Silence followed her like a shadow. The man she married slept peacefully upstairs. He believed the empire was his alone. He believed success came from his voice and face. He never looked back to see who held the ground beneath him. Years earlier, nothing looked like this. There was no glass office, no luxury cars, no fame. There was only fear, debt, and a small rented room. Emma remembered those days clearly. She remembered sitting on the floor with papers spread around her. She remembered numbers written by hand. She remembered plans that failed and plans that survived. The idea for the company did not come from him. It came from her quiet research. From her nights reading reports while he slept. From her understanding of risk and timing. When the first bank said no, Emma found another path. When investors laughed, she changed the strategy. She made calls using borrowed phones. She learned laws, systems, and loopholes. She built protection before growth. She built structure before fame. He became the face because she allowed it. She stayed behind because someone had to stay safe. She knew ego could be seen, but control must stay hidden. As the company grew, so did the distance between them. He traveled, spoke, and celebrated. She stayed home and solved problems. She fixed legal risks before they appeared. She redirected money when danger came close. She protected the company from collapse more than once. Each time she said nothing. Each time she stepped back. Each time he took credit. He called her simple. He called her emotional. He told others she did not understand business. Emma accepted the words without a fight. She knew truth did not need noise. The first betrayal came quietly. He stopped asking her opinion. Then he stopped listening. Then he stopped coming home on time. Emma noticed the change. She noticed the new perfume, the late nights, the cold tone in his voice. Still, she remained silent. Because silence kept the foundation stable. The company reached new heights. News called him a genius. Magazines praised his vision. Awards carried only his name. No one mentioned Emma. No one asked who built the systems. No one cared who carried the weight. At home, respect disappeared. She became a shadow in her own house. A presence without value. One night, she overheard a call. A soft laugh. A promise. A plan to move shares. That night, Emma did not cry. She opened her laptop. She checked documents she had protected for years. She reviewed contracts written under her guidance. Her name appeared where it mattered. Her control remained untouched. Her silence had not been empty. She realized something important. She had protected the empire so well that even its owner did not know the truth. The next morning, she looked at him differently. Not with love. Not with anger. But with clarity. He talked about the future confidently. He spoke about trust and loyalty. He did not see the wall he was walking toward. Emma listened without interruption. She watched him leave. She closed the door slowly. In the quiet room, she felt the weight lift from her chest. For the first time, silence felt powerful. She remembered every sacrifice. Every night without sleep. Every fear she swallowed. She remembered why she stayed invisible. To protect the dream. To protect the work. To protect herself. But protection had limits. Outside, the city moved fast. Inside, Emma made a decision without words. She would not destroy the empire. She would reveal the truth. Not with noise, but with precision. The foundation had been forgotten, but it was still standing. And soon, everyone would feel its weight. The silence was about to speak. The boardroom felt different that morning. The air was heavier. Smiles were sharper. Confidence walked louder than truth. Emma entered quietly and took her usual seat at the far end. She wore simple clothes, calm face, lowered eyes. No one greeted her. No one expected her to matter. The man walked in with pride. His steps were strong. His voice was loud. The room listened to him like a command. Beside him walked the mistress. Her heels clicked with purpose. Her smile carried ownership. She sat closer to power than Emma ever had. The meeting began. Charts appeared on screens. Numbers were praised. Success was celebrated. Emma watched silently. She recognized every figure, every plan, every risk hidden behind confidence. Then the moment came. The man stood and cleared his throat. He spoke about trust, about loyalty, about rewarding those who truly mattered. The mistress looked around proudly. Board members leaned forward with interest. He announced her new position. He praised her vision. He praised her support. He praised her loyalty. Applause filled the room, loud and endless. Then he looked at Emma. His eyes were cold, his voice sharper. He said she had never understood business. He said she was too emotional, too quiet, too weak for leadership. Laughter followed. Not cruel laughter, but careless laughter. The kind that wounds deeper. Emma felt the sound hit her chest. Her fingers tightened under the table. Her breath slowed. Her face stayed calm. The mistress smiled wider. She spoke softly but clearly. She thanked the company for believing in her. She promised growth and loyalty. She glanced at Emma, not with anger, but with victory. Emma lowered her eyes. She allowed the moment to pass. She allowed the insult to land. Inside her mind, something shifted again. She remembered a different room. Years ago, a tiny office with broken chairs, where no one believed in them. She remembered convincing the first investor, She remembered calming panic during near collapse. She remembered stopping mistakes before they became disasters. She remembered standing behind him on stages, feeding him lines quietly, fixing deals silently. Now she was called useless. Now she was laughed at. The meeting continued. Plans were made without her input. Decisions were finalized without her consent. Her silence was mistaken for acceptance. One board member glanced at her briefly. There was hesitation. But fear won. Power moved forward without question. At the end of the meeting, the man announced a celebration dinner. The mistress held his arm proudly. Board members congratulated them both. Emma stood last. She gathered her notebook slowly, her hands steady. As she walked out, the mistress stopped her. She spoke softly, almost kindly. She said Emma should be grateful. She said silence suited her. She said some people were meant to stand behind others. Emma looked at her. For the first time directly. Her eyes were calm, clear, unafraid. She said nothing. That silence made the mistress uncomfortable. She turned away quickly. Emma walked into the hallway. The sound of laughter faded behind her. In the elevator mirror, she studied her reflection. Not broken, not weak, just focused. At home that night, the man did not speak to her. He was busy texting, smiling at his phone. Emma prepared dinner quietly. She ate alone. She cleaned slowly. Later, she sat at her desk. She opened files she had guarded for years. Legal structures, ownership paths, emergency controls. Everything was still in place, untouched, hidden. She realized something clearly. Public humiliation was not the end. It was permission. They had shown her who they were. They had shown her what silence cost. Outside, the city lights burned bright. Inside, Emma made no sound. She sent one email. Short, professional, precise. Then she closed her laptop. And for the first time in years, she slept without fear. Because humiliation had awakened something stronger. And the people who laughed had no idea. The foundation they mocked was about to move. The house felt colder that morning. Not from weather, but from distance. Emma woke before sunrise. She stood by the window and watched the city breathe. Lights turning on. Lives moving forward. The man slept peacefully behind her, unaware of the storm growing quietly inside his own home. Emma moved through the house slowly, every step careful, every thought clear. She made breakfast, placed the plate on the table, and waited. When he came down, he spoke about meetings and deadlines. He did not look at her. He did not ask how she felt. Emma listened. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, soft, but steady. She said there were risks in the recent changes. She said moving shares so quickly could damage trust. She said the structure was fragile. He laughed, not loudly, but with disrespect. He told her she worried too much. He said she did not understand growth. He reminded her to stay in her place. Emma did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply said one sentence. This path will cost you more than you expect. He paused for a moment, then smiled confidently. He told her fear had made her weak. She nodded and said nothing more. That silence was her warning. Later that day, Emma went to a quiet office building across town, a place no one associated with the company. Inside, she met people who remembered her, people who respected her without applause. She reviewed documents, checked timelines, confirmed protections. She did not rush. She did not panic. She moved with purpose. Meanwhile, the man celebrated his growing influence. He announced new partnerships. He promised bold expansion. The mistress stayed close, advising loudly, smiling confidently. Emma watched from a distance, every move recorded in her mind. That evening, she received a message. A bank had delayed a transfer. A legal office requested clarification. Small signs, quiet signs, the beginning of resistance. She did not react publicly. She prepared privately. At dinner, the man complained about delays. He blamed others. He blamed systems. Emma listened quietly. Then she said one thing. Some systems protect themselves. He looked at her with annoyance. He asked what she meant. She smiled softly and said nothing. That night, she opened a locked drawer. Inside were files untouched for years, agreements written carefully, emergency clauses activated only under risk, names placed where no one looked. Her name. She remembered why she built it this way. Power attracts noise. Control needs silence. The next morning, a countdown began. Contracts faced review. Access slowed. Approvals required double confirmation. The man felt frustration growing. He raised his voice at assistants. He questioned advisors. The mistress urged him to push harder, to ignore hesitation, to force speed. Emma watched calmly. She knew pressure revealed truth. At home, she packed a small bag, not to leave, but to be ready. She stood once more in the empty hallway, her reflection steady, her breath even. She whispered a memory, not a threat, but a reminder. Everything that rises rests on something. Outside, the city moved unaware. Inside the empire, cracks began to form. The warning had been given, silently, clearly, and soon, they would understand. The first sign came quietly, so small that most people ignored it. A delayed approval, a paused signature. In the glass tower downtown, assistants whispered. Emails went unanswered longer than usual. Phones rang twice before someone picked up. The man felt it before he understood it. Something was slowing down. Something invisible was pushing back. He stood in his office staring at the city. The same city that once moved at his command, now felt distant, unresponsive. He called his legal team. They blamed technical reviews. He called finance. They blamed compliance checks. Nothing sounded urgent, but nothing moved forward. The mistress sat across from him, tapping her fingers impatiently. She told him to push harder, to demand answers. Confidence still filled her voice, but uncertainty crept into her eyes. At home, Emma felt the shift without checking her phone. She sensed change like a quiet echo, the kind only builders recognize. She moved through her day calmly. No celebration, no reaction. She had waited years for stability. She could wait days for truth. By afternoon, a major transfer froze. Not cancelled, just paused. The man's temper exploded. He shouted at staff, accused advisors of incompetence. The empire had never said no before. News reached the board. Concerns surfaced. Meetings were scheduled. The mistress insisted everything was under control. She suggested distractions, public announcements, strong appearances. Emma watched from a distance. She saw fear hiding behind noise. That evening, the man came home late, his confidence shaken, his voice sharp. He blamed outside forces. He blamed systems. He blamed timing. Emma listened quietly, then asked a simple question. Did you check the foundation? He stopped, confused, annoyed. He said foundations do not move. They support. Emma nodded gently. Some foundations are alive. He laughed nervously and walked away. The next day, access to certain accounts required additional verification. Legal offices requested original documents. The man felt control slipping. He demanded answers, but received procedures. The mistress grew frustrated. She questioned loyalty. She doubted partners. Emma remained invisible, but active. She received calls from people who remembered her voice, not her face. People who trusted her systems. She gave no commands. She only confirmed processes. Everything moved exactly as designed. By midweek, rumors spread quietly. Not scandals, but uncertainty. Markets dislike silence. Investors fear pause more than loss. The man's phone rang constantly. Questions replaced praise. The mistress suggested moving faster, ignoring checks, forcing deals. Emma knew rushing only deepened collapse. At night, she opened her old notebook. Handwritten notes from years ago. Plans made for moments like this. Safeguards placed with care. Not to destroy, but to protect truth. She remembered telling herself one sentence long ago. If they forget who built it, remind them gently. The next morning, a board meeting was called urgently. Tension filled the room. Voices overlapped. Confidence cracked. The man stood firm. But his tone changed. He spoke louder, but said less. Emma entered quietly, took her usual seat, ignored by most. But a few eyes watched her now, not with doubt, but with curiosity. She felt it. The shift. Power does not fall loudly. It leaks. By the end of the day, the empire was still standing, but unsteady. Emma walked home slowly. The city lights flickered around her. She knew this was only the beginning. The collapse had started. Not with noise, but with silence. The boardroom filled early that day. Earlier than usual. Earlier than comfort allowed. Faces looked tense. Not angry. Not confident. Just uncertain. The man sat at the head of the table. His posture stiff. His eyes tired. Confidence forced into his voice. Documents lay neatly in front of each seat. Thicker than before. Heavier than expected. Emma entered quietly and took her place. No one announced her arrival. Yet several eyes followed her. Something had changed. The meeting began with numbers. Strong on the surface, but fragile beneath. A legal advisor cleared his throat. He spoke carefully, explaining delays, requesting verification. The man interrupted, demanding solutions, demanding speed. The advisor remained calm. He said systems required confirmation from the original authority. The room went quiet. The man asked what that meant. The advisor paused, then answered slowly. It meant signatures, ownership structures, control clauses. The mistress shifted in her seat. Her smile faded. Her eyes narrowed. The advisor opened a file. He read names aloud. Dates. Agreements. Emma's name echoed through the room. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. The man laughed nervously. He said there must be a mistake. He said Emma never handled business. The advisor slid documents across the table. Original filings. Protected clauses. Safeguards activated by risk. Every line pointed to one truth. Emma was not a shadow. She was the structure. Board members leaned forward. Shock replaced doubt. The mistress stood abruptly. Her voice sharp. She accused manipulation. Betrayal. Emma remained seated. Her expression calm. She finally spoke. Her voice quiet but steady. She said she built the foundation when no one believed. She said she stayed silent to protect growth. She said control without noise keeps systems alive. Her words filled the room. Not loud, but undeniable. The man stared at her. Memories returned too late. Late nights. Quiet suggestions. Problems solved without credit. Regret crossed his face. Then fear. The advisor continued, explaining that the recent changes triggered safeguards, not to punish, but to protect ownership and stability. The board absorbed the truth, one breath at a time. The mistress backed away slowly, her confidence gone, her power empty. Emma stood at last. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply stated facts. She said the empire was safe, but leadership required clarity, not ego. She said trust could not exist without truth. The man tried to speak, but words failed him. The room decided without shouting, without celebration. Control shifted, not dramatically, but correctly. After the meeting, people avoided eye contact, not out of shame, but respect. Emma walked through the hallway, the same path she walked for years unnoticed, now filled with quiet acknowledgement. Outside, sunlight touched the building softly. She felt no victory, only relief. At home that night, she packed carefully, not to escape, but to move forward. The man watched silently, unable to stop her, unable to follow. Emma paused at the door. She spoke one final sentence. Silence was never weakness. She stepped out, leaving behind an empire that finally knew her name. The city woke under a gray sky. Clouds hung low as if waiting. The empire stood tall, but its heart felt empty. News of the meeting spread quietly, not through headlines, but through careful words. Whispers passed between offices and screens. The man arrived early, earlier than he ever had before. The building felt colder without applause. He sat alone in his office, surrounded by awards that no longer mattered. Each one reminded him of a voice he ignored. Across town, Emma walked through a park. Leaves moved gently under her feet. She breathed deeply, not from relief, but from decision. She knew this part was harder than exposure. Truth changes power. Choice defines character. At the office, board members gathered again, this time without tension, only gravity. They spoke of stability, of repair, of restoring trust. Someone asked where Emma was. The question alone changed everything. The man heard her name and stood. His voice shook. He asked for time. He needed to speak to her. He found her later that day, standing by the river, watching water move forward without memory. He apologized. Not loudly, not perfectly. He admitted his blindness, his pride, his failure to listen. Emma listened quietly, as she always had. He asked her to return, to lead openly, to take control publicly. He promised respect. He promised change. Emma looked at the water. She remembered every silent sacrifice, every ignored warning, every lonely night. She knew power returned cannot erase pain. She asked one question. Would you listen if there was no empire? He could not answer. Back at the company, the mistress had vanished from importance. Her influence gone. Her voice empty. Legal steps moved forward calmly, not in anger, but correction. Emma returned to the building briefly, not as a leader, but as a witness. She addressed the board once more. Her words clear, her tone calm. She said the empire needed truth, but also humility. She said leadership should protect people, not consume them. Then she made her choice. She declined public control. She transferred oversight to a balanced structure. She ensured stability without domination. The board accepted, understanding that real strength does not seek attention. The man watched silently, knowing what he lost could not be reclaimed. That evening, Emma stood alone on her balcony. The city lights spread below her. She felt sadness, not for the empire, but for the silence that cost her love. She closed her eyes and released it. The final choice was not revenge, not triumph, but dignity. And sometimes, that is the strongest ending. Morning arrived quietly. No headlines screamed. No alarms rang. Yet everything had changed. The empire still stood tall against the skyline, glass shining, steel strong, but its soul felt different. Emma woke in a small rented apartment. Simple walls, soft light, peaceful silence. For the first time in many years, silence did not feel heavy. It felt free. She made tea slowly, watched steam rise, listened to the city waking below. There was no schedule waiting for her, no crisis demanding her attention, no voice telling her to stay quiet. Across the city, the man stood alone in his office, the same office where applause once filled the air, now echoing with regret. Awards lined the shelves, but they felt hollow, because the one person who earned them was gone. He replayed memories in his mind, moments he ignored, warnings he dismissed, silence he misunderstood. He finally understood something painful. Some people do not shout when they leave. They disappear. At the company, systems worked smoothly. Processes flowed calmly, just as Emma had designed long ago. No chaos followed her exit. No collapse came. Only stability. The board respected her choice. Employees felt safer without knowing why. The empire survived, not because of power, but because of quiet wisdom. Emma spent her days differently now. She walked more. She slept peacefully. She spoke when she wished. She helped quietly again, not for recognition, but for meaning. She advised young founders anonymously. She guided without ownership. She protected others from making the same mistakes. One evening, she received a message. Short, simple. It was an apology, not asking for forgiveness, not asking her back, just acknowledging her truth. Emma read it once, then placed the phone down. Some apologies arrived too late, but they still matter. She felt a tear roll down her cheek, not from pain, but release. That tear carried years of silence, years of sacrifice, years of being unseen. And when it fell, It felt like closure. Weeks passed. The city moved on. Stories changed. New faces rose. But something invisible remained. A lesson written into the foundation of the empire. Power without respect collapses. Silence without dignity destroys. Emma stood one morning before a mirror, looked at herself fully, not as a wife, not as a shadow, but as a woman who chose herself. She smiled softly. In another building, the man signed papers alone. Slower now. Careful. Every decision reminded him of the cost of pride. Emma closed the door of her apartment gently, stepped into sunlight. Her story did not end with applause. It ended with peace. And sometimes, the strongest ending is a quiet one.